Star Trek was going through a little renaissance in the mid-90s. The brand was coming off the high point that was 7 seasons of The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine's embrace of serialization had long-term story arcs peaking, and Paramount's new flagship Star Trek series Voyager was just starting to get underway. If you want some sort of proof that the IP was hitting this cultural critical mass, look no further than the 1998 release of the Star Trek Experience attraction in Las Vegas, whose doors remained open for a full decade thereafter. Star Trek hit the mainstream. And thankfully for us, mainstream means video games, which doesn't mean it wasn't getting video games prior to this point, just that they increased in fidelity and scope around this time. Trek is old enough to have decades of video game history prior to the 90s, but any list of them will reveal predominantly text-based interactive fiction or full-motion video experiences. Outside of the occasional point-and-click adventure, it was uncommon to see what you would consider a core gaming genre, and it's clear that most of the list was hyper-focused on Star Trek fans first, and the broader gaming audience second. Reading 90s reviews of Star Trek games will almost always begin with the reviewer revealing their disappointment for this IP in the video game space, not unlike the modern reviewer's obligation to discuss a rough transition to 3D when reviewing a Sonic game. But as the new millennium came forth, you could see that sentiment shift into a sort of tepid optimism as more good, if not groundbreaking, titles came out with the Starfleet insignia stamped on the cover. With Interplay producing titles under the original series license, and Activision producing titles for everything else, we had something resembling a golden age of Trek gaming. Ask a friend what the best Star Trek game is, and assuming they don't laugh at you while declaring there aren't any good ones, they'll probably pick something released between 1998 and 2004. There's also a pretty good chance they're going to say Star Trek Armada. Star Trek Armada was released by Activision in 2000 to appeal to a PC gaming audience of real-time strategy players. It didn't review amazingly, but it was definitely competent, and I think the years have been kind to it. That probably owes to it being as much a game about spectacle as it is strategy, which works for me. I'll be the first to admit I'm here for the Trek first and the RTS second, and part of what makes that such an appealing mindset to approach Armada with is that it really nails the presentation. 3D models in RTSs weren't exactly unheard of at this time, but they were still a year or two out from becoming the norm, and Armada knows just how good it looks. Each of the 4 factions have about half a dozen ships, and a handful of different buildings, each of which can be zoomed in on closely to witness their polygonal glory. A small view screen on the bottom right of the UI presents a close-up of whatever conflict the game deems most pressing, and you're always one double click away from being able to make that cinematic view your primary one, prioritizing favorable viewing angles over strategic ones. And I was in that view quite a bit, because having moving dioramas of Star Trek battles that can be zoomed and rotated is pretty appealing. You can watch the Federation fight the Klingons fight the Romulans fight the Borg, and the Borg fight everyone. You also get full VO by a bunch of the original voice cast, which means right-clicking repeatedly into the fog of war will have Jean-Luc Picard himself affirming your inputs.
Lay in a new course. Make it so. Make it so. Mr. LaForge, reroute all auxiliary power to the engines.
The 4 main factions each get their own campaign of 4 to 5 missions each, and bookending each mission are cutscenes to drive the story further. The static screens that deliver the story may not meet the same presentation bar that the core gameplay does, but man, the story itself is campy fun. A damaged ship limping into our view is actually a warning from the future! Time travelers warn us of grim coming times, and Picard's hesitance to mess with timelines is overwhelmed by his urgency to stop a cataclysmic future, which may or may not be driven by the Borg's success at assimilating Spock. It is Trek at its cheesiest, and it's also split into 4 different POVs, villains included, allowing you to see every angle of the cheese. When it comes to the real-time space battles themselves, there's a whole lot of transferable knowledge from other RTSs, and an easy mode if you don't have that. The factions do have some texture to how they play, but their game plans and resource management aren't radically different at low-level play. Build your starbase, resource that starbase with worker units that can mine nearby assets, construct buildings, then have those buildings construct units. The total count of buildings and units available is reasonably low, and the fact that only minor variations exist between factions means that I was able to hit a comfortable skill floor pretty early on and retain those skills from campaign to campaign. Once you've amassed an armada of about a dozen units, you can take on the enemy base and hopefully secure a victory. It's simple in that way, and though the aesthetic of space-based RTSs can give the impression of techie convolution, Armada never does that. It's clear and straightforward, with unit quantity and complexity that doesn't demand an RTS veteran at the bridge, though they will be the ones who adapt the quickest. The one appreciable addition to Armada's gameplay that you won't see in any of its peers is its unique mechanic of crew management. The numerical crew value assigned to a ship is essentially a second health bar that sits beneath the shields, but it also acts as this transferable resource between ships. Get into transporter range of a vessel and beam over more units, lest you fall below the required minimums for the vessel to operate at full efficiency. You can transport onto shieldless enemy vessels as well, for some swashbuckling action allowing seizure of their ship, and some special abilities particularly incentivize this by allowing you to bypass that shieldless requirement. It's a thoughtful inclusion that makes sense for the IP, adds some strategy, but doesn't rock the boat of the game's other mechanics too much. You can get through the campaign without committing too much thought to it. Other strategy comes into play with a few of the environmental hazards and safeties. Warp holes can transport you instantly to the opposite side of the map at fixed locations, colored nebulas may be tactical cover or dangerous obstacles, and asteroid belts can carve up the map into distinct regions. But for the purpose of the single-player campaign, most of the strategy actually comes from something I wasn't expecting: varied mission design. Because though the most common type of battle may be straightforward RTS bouts of resource gathering and spending, Armada breaks those up with daring escape missions, stealthy search and rescues, and genocidal directives to extinguish all units from the battlefield. Each faction has at least 2 non-traditional missions, and that does a ton for the playability of the campaign. I blew through it over the course of a long weekend. I know that's largely because it's short, it's also because that shortness is well paced and varied. And it's a testament to the game's quality that I spent the following week going through it again. Its length is an asset in its own right, allowing for the story to be told without any drag, and allowing for the game to be beaten as this easily digestible episode of Trek. It's for that reason that I think Armada is an easy sell for someone looking to visit or revisit the game. It's also on digital distribution as of last year, making that an actual possibility now. Much like its antagonist the Borg, Star Trek Armada is an assimilation. It pulls together genre-staple mechanics and straightforward gameplay, then uses varied mission design and a strong integration of the IP into the presentation to make the package worthwhile. If you're a fan of RTSs or Trek, you should give Armada a try. Just don't expect its gameplay to explore any strange new worlds.